Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining again. Again, we're having some WebEx troubles, so if you would, just give us a few minutes to debug the issue. And I think Vicki is going to advance slides for me. Let's see, so the issue is I can't see what I'm presenting, so this will be a fun one. Let me pull up my version of the slides, and then Vicki will advance as we need to. All right, so just give me 1 second. Okay, so logistics for today. Our webinar is scheduled for 1 hour. We do record these. They will be posted at our webinar link that you see there, and also that know that we put these out on YouTube as well. We do have all participants muted so that we can make sure that the audio quality is the best it can be for everyone. We do want your questions, however, so there is a chat option in WebEx, and if you would, please enter your questions there. We may defer some of these till the end, but we do like questions throughout. The little tricky thing that will happen today is that I can't see your questions, so we will have someone at ISC home office jabbering them to me while we're doing the presentation. So, okay, a little bit about myself. I'm primarily a sales engineer here at ISC. I do lots of things, though. I'm also our main professional supports person, so if there is a DNS or DHCP issue with someone that's using our software and critical infrastructure, I'm the one that usually shows up, no matter where it is. So that's the person that will be talking to you today. Okay, so we're here to talk about Kia. We're going to start off with why did we do Kia here at ISC? Well, a couple of reasons. ISC DHCP is now 21 years old. No matter where you are in the world, that means it can now, it's now legal to drink. So we think it's definitely time for this software to sort of be revamped or made more modern. But we are very proud of ISC DHCP. So it's been very stable and very effective for many, many years, obviously, and is still in use in many, many places. However, there's some drawbacks to ISC DHCP. It's a bit slow by modern standards. You do have to store your lease information in a flat text file. This is not very optimal for some folks. While you can do some restarts, or while you can do some configuration changes without restart via OMAPI, the OMAPI tool is somewhat limited, and a lot of folks find it quite cumbersome. So there's that. Usually we have a lot of folks that will make configuration changes to their ISC DHCP and have to do a restart. And this can, restarts of DHCP servers can take quite a while, depending on the size and scope of your network. Also with DHCP failover, with ISC DHCP, this is done in peer arrangements. So you have two servers that can share or hand out portions of a pool. And the DHCP failover, it works, but also it is somewhat quite painful to a lot of folks, and we understand that. Some of this is based on the protocol's design. Some of this is based on, how it's done in ISC DHCP. But you also have regardless of all that, you also have the issue of if the two failover peers get out of sync, like you have an actual situation where you need to fail over, that recovery time and resync time between the two peers can take quite a while. And then it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about ISC DHCP without acknowledging that we've, that you as administrators have had quite a bit of pain with the DHCPD and DHCPD conf man pages. So we understand that. We share your pain in that. Next slide, please. All right. So Kia itself is a DHCP server. It is written in C++. And about the server part, if you are familiar with ISC DHCP, you know that it the ISC DHCP ships with a server, client, and relay portions of software. With Kia, you are only, this is only a DHCP server itself. So we haven't found much use to rewrite the client side of it, and the relay side, if you still need to use that, that is still to be found in ISC DHCP. So with Kia, it is written in C++. Of course, it's standards compliant. We are ISC, and we've certainly had a hand in developing the standards for DHCP, and we continue to do so. It is, Kia is open source. There is DHCP v4 and DHCP v6 available. One of the things we're really excited about with Kia is that it is easily extensible, and you can do this via what we call hooks. And we'll have more on that coming up. And next slide, please. So what we're seeing with Kia thus far is it has much better performance. One thing that's really, really nice that people have gotten really excited about is that you're able to, instead of just storing the lease information in a flat file, you can now hook into a backend database. So this is exciting for a number of reasons for folks, and we're going to talk about a couple of those. Also with Kia, you do not have to restart whenever you make a configuration change unless the physical interfaces have actually changed. We are also very proud that Kia is much better documented, obviously, than ISC DHCP, but we think it's very well documented, and if you find any issues in the documentation, please do let us know. Okay, next slide. And about the Kia hooks, these are also written in C++, and they will either be written by us, some other third party, or yourself. So what we expect is right now we don't have many hooks that are written by us available in the distribution, but over time that will increase. We expect to get write some of our own. We expect to get some contributed to us. But we've already started seeing some very exciting ways in which people are using this. And Vicki just alerted me that we actually just got our first hooks app published by a user outside of ISC, and it was published on GitHub. So we're very excited about that. And we hope to see further contributions as well. On the next slide, please. This sort of shows one quick graphical way that you can make use of hooks. So one of the ways you can use hooks is in packet processing. So as the DHCP packet is processed, there are what we call hook points. And for example, like packet receive or on lease renew, at these certain hook points, you can call out to a function that, again, you have written or something that we've helped you write to do custom things. So Kia is really about, for us, sort of rethinking how you do DHCP. It's not the most exciting topic, we realize, but Kia does supply some ways for you to rethink how you're doing things and possibly do things in a much better fashion. One of the ones that we've seen and have been excited about with this one already is Facebook has actually, they've been an early adopter of Kia in their data centers. They are using Kia in their for provisioning their production data centers. They started with Kia 0.91, which honestly scared us a good bit, but it has worked out. So they've gone from sort of provisioning things where if they had to sort of restart the provisioning process, it would take a couple of hours. They've gotten that down to a few minutes just by using Kia and using hooks. Now, we are going to, next slide, please, Vicki. That's mostly all I'll say about hooks on this webinar. I'm very excited that we have Marcin Sodeski, who is one of our software engineers, and he is one of our primary Kia engineers. And he'll be doing a hooks-specific webinar just 3 weeks from now. So hopefully those of you that are listening now will sign up for the Kia Hooks webinar as well. Marcin is awesome. He gets really excited about the technology. So you'll have a really good time talking hooks with Marcin. Okay, next slide. So again, with Kia, we're sort of stepping back and saying maybe we can rethink how we're doing these things that we all have to do. We all have to provision our clients to get addresses. We all have to give them, you know, DNS servers to use, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we're excited about is, again, this hooking into a backend database currently for your lease information. Now, one of the things we've already heard back from users is, hey, you know, it's great that we can put the leases in the database. It would kind of be cool if we could put the whole config in the database. And so that's a path that we're going down. Currently, you can do some host reservations in MySQL, as well as having the leases in MySQL. Postgres, we'll be adding that for Postgres very soon, but that's more to be determined on that. So again, we're very excited about how people are already starting to use Kia and already starting to give us really excellent feedback on it. So again, as the slide says, MySQL and Postgres are the databases that are currently supported. Note that you still can write to a file. Kia calls it a mem file, and it is a CSV file. We do have someone that's been talking to us about hooking into a Cassandra database, and so we expect at some point in the near future, you'll be able to use a Cassandra database too, if that's your preference. So the idea here, though, is if we have Kia servers and they're handling all the DHCP processing for you, and you can talk to the same database from multiple Kia servers, then this sort of expands the ability to do certain things. And one of those that we're really excited about is failover. So if several Kia servers are, again, pointing to the same database, then if one of those Kia servers goes down, then a client could just go to the next closest Kia server and do a renewal, get a new address, whatever it needs to do. You could also do some things, pretty funky things like Anycast DHCP. So we're really excited to see how this turns out. We're hopeful that it's going to make failover a lot easier. Now, again, of course, this is moving where you're going to do your high availability setup, right, from the DHCP server itself to the database. But what we've found is databases have gotten really good at doing high availability, and so maybe that's where we should do this in the DHCP world. So again, we're really excited to see how that turns out. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's get down to the business of actually how do we go about installing Kia and configuring it. Well, you have the two, historical options for installing Kia. You can build from source, and I'll be walking you through building from source in the next few slides. The other option you have is we already have some OS packagers that have picked up Kia, and we're very excited about that as well. There's a list of some of them here. I have a link at the end of the presentation in our references slide where you can see the most up-to-date list. I believe there are some BSDs that have picked up Kia as well. But if any of these are your favorite flavor, you can certainly just install from Yum or whatever your package maintainer is. Would certainly make it a little more simpler than installing from source. Okay, next slide. Okay, if you're going to install from source, which a lot of us still do, a lot of us are pretty old school, of course, these are the requirements that you're going to have before you do your install. So you will need a G++ compiler, make, of course. Boost is a set of C++ libraries, and you will need to select a crypto library. Choices are currently OpenSSL, or Botan. And a lot of people ask us, well, why does a DHCP server need a crypto library? And the answer is, if you're going to do dynamic DNS, that's why you need a crypto library. It's the way in which DHCIDs are created. And then there's log for C++ to get you some logging. And once you have these requirements installed, then you can download the Kia source tarball from our website. Now, if you go to www.isc.org, that site, over on the left-hand side, there's a quick downloads area where you can get Kia. You can also go to the Kia, www.isc.org/Kia. again, all these links will be on the references slide at the end. But there's a couple of different places on the website that you can get Kia. Currently, it is a 1.0.0 release. So it is an official supported version. Okay, next slide. All right, once you have your tarball and you've unzipped it and untarred it, you go into your Kia directory, and just like you're familiar with ISC DHCP or bind even, you're going to run configure, make, and make install. So as we always do with the configure script, we work really hard to try to have that script figure out, what kind of hardware you're on, what OS, what libraries you have available. So we usually, in most cases, you don't have to add any options to configure. However, some that you might want to consider for Kia is if you want if you want things in a different location other than the defaults, and I'll speak to what the defaults are coming up. But if you want them in other locations, you can use the -- prefix option. Now, if you do, this one's important. If you do want to hook into a database backend, you do have to specify this at compile time. So you will have to add either the -- with -DHCP -PGSQL or with -DHCP -MySQL at configure time. Okay. If you have a preference on the OpenSSL or Botan, you'd want to add that here as well. For my test purposes on my machine, I already had OpenSSL installed, so I didn't have to I didn't have to add this option with OpenSSL. I just found the one I had and used that one. Well, once your configure has run, then of course you run make and you run make install. Next slide, please. Okay. Very good news. There is actually a default config file that comes with the Kia distribution. So we've heard for many, many years, of course, particularly in the buying world, please give me a default config file. So we do have that with Kia. By default, the location is in user local etc Kia, and it is called kia.conf. And I've shared just the very top of that file here because it's important. Even though there is a default config file, you can start Kia with that as it is, it's not going to do anything for you because it doesn't specify which interfaces that the server should listen on, and there are no subnets or options declared. Now, the good news, though, is in that file, it's very obvious where you specify your interfaces and very obvious how you do your subnets and any other options you want. In other words, there are several things that are configured. They're just commented out. And so you can uncomment them and change them to suit your config or your environment. Next slide, please. Once you've played around with your kia.conf, how you start the server directly is by issuing one or both of these commands. Note that, like ISC DHCP, if you want to do v4 and v6 on the same server, you have two running processes. So in this case, we have kia-dhcp4 and kia-dhcp6. The good news, though, is that you can do the configurations for both of these right in the same file. Next slide. We also have Kia Control. And again, good news, Kia Control comes with a default config file as well. It's also located in user local etc Kia by default. It's called kiacontrol.conf. This is a snippet here from that file. So if you're only, for the example here, if you're only doing, say, DHCP v4 on this server at this time, you could edit this config file and change DHCP6 equal yes, change that to no. So pretty simple and straightforward. Kia Control is how you can start up Kia and how you can hook into any system startup scripts that you want to. You can use Kia Control with those. You can also use Kia Control to shut down the server, reconfigure, or do a status. So again, I mentioned earlier on that one of the main wins with Kia is that you can make changes to the configuration and not have to restart. So you can make changes to your kia.conf, and when you're ready for those to be implemented, you would simply issue a Kia control restart. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you're going to start Kia with Kia control, it's very simple. Kia control start, and again, I'm listing the default locations here. And then you can also check on Kia's status with the Kia control command, as shown here. The thing I like about this also is it shows what configuration file Kia is using at this point. So sometimes you may inherit someone's someone's environment, or you may have someone that has accidentally started a couple of different Kias and they might be using, you know, I don't know. You can get in a situation where people have started multiple types of multiple pieces of the same software and they might be using different configs. So the Kia control will show you which configuration file it is pointing to. Okay, next slide. Okay, and pretty straightforward as well. You can use Kia control to stop the Kia server. And again, once you've made any changes to the config file, you can use Kia control reload. And you will get some informational messages back to let you know if that's been successful or not. Okay, next slide. So in terms of configuration, these are the basics that we're going to go over today. And so let's get to it. Next slide, please. So note that, and you may have already noticed that Kia's configuration is in JSON format. So if you're a JSON fan, then this is going to be really easy and straightforward and nice for you. So I also want to point out that not only do we have the default config files, but we also have many example configs. So if you go in your installation directory, no matter how you installed Kia, if you go to the installer/doc/examples, you'll find 3 directories under there. There's Kia 4, Kia 6, and DDNS. So if you are wanting to, based on what your requirements are, if you're setting up a IPv6 network, for example, you'd want to go into the Kia 6 directory, and there are many configuration examples in there. You'll see things like single subnet configuration, several subnet configuration file, host reservations configuration file, and they're separated in files. So based on the file name, you'll be able to determine which one you should take a look at based on what you want to configure for your environment. So these have made getting started with Kia much more straightforward and faster. And of course, if you want to do DNS or IPv4, then you check the configs in those directories. Okay, next slide. So let's take a look, and actually most of these examples are pulled directly from those example files that I just mentioned. So by attending this webinar, you will already be familiar with how these files look. So in this first example here, I'm just simply defining the interfaces that this server is going to listen on. And so this is a DHCP4 configuration, excuse me. And so I'm defining my interfaces config, and I'm simply defining that on this particular server, I'm doing DHCP things on ETH0 and ETH3. Okay, pretty straightforward. One of the things I like about Kia, much more so than ISC DHCP, is, and maybe it's because it's in JSON format, but just the config itself, the statements just make a lot more sense, and the flow makes a lot more sense in my brain than it did for ISC DHCP. Next slide, please. Okay, so defining the lease database. As I've mentioned, you have a couple of options. You can use memfile, which again is a CSV file. Memfile is going to be the most performant, so if you're worried about performance, memfile may be the way you want to go. But what we're seeing so far is even with the database backends, you're going to be getting faster performance than you were with ISC DHCP. So in your configuration file, you would have, if you want to use memfile, you simply use the lease database, and type memfile, and that's it, okay? Now, I want to point out here that there's a very definite OR here that does not exist in a real config file. This is just on the slide saying you're either going to do memfile or you're going to do a database. So if you want to do a database, you specify your lease database. Here we're going to specify type Postgres, and our host is, in this case, pgsql-server.example.com. We're going to name this Kia database, and for the sake of fitting into my slides here, I've snipped off the credentials, but of course you're going to need whatever your user and password is for the database itself so that Kia can access the data. But that's really how you define how you're going to have, what format and where the lease databases live. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Here we're defining subnets and pools. So very simply, I'm doing a subnet 4 declaration. So in this case, I'm setting a single pool, and my pool is from 192.0.2.10 all the way to 192.0.2.200. And so the subnet is 192.0.2.0/24. And I'm going to be handing out addresses from this pool over the interface ETH0. So again, to me, in my mind, these statements and configuration statements are much, much more straightforward than how we did this in ISC DHCP. Next slide. So one of the very common things that you would do with a DHCP server is not only hand out addresses, but you hand out some other options to clients. The one we're going to show you is a very common one. So my clients want in this subnet want to get, or in this pool, want to get not only an address from me, but they want some DNS servers as well. So I'm able to, by adding to this config that you just saw, I'm adding option data here, and I'm saying I'm going to send domain name servers to these clients, and the data of those domain name servers are these addresses, so 192.0.2.1 and 192.0.2.2. So these are, if these are Linux clients or whatever, then those are going to be the name servers that are listed in their etsyresolve.conf based on what I'm giving them from this Kia configuration. Okay. And next slide. Okay, so lease lifetimes. Just wanted to point out that by default, the valid lifetime of a lease in Kia is 4,000. So that's a little over an hour, because this is in seconds. So that's a 1.11, et cetera, seconds, I believe. So it's a little over an hour. Of course, this is easily configurable. You would just go in and change the valid lifetime to be whatever you want it to be, again, in seconds. Note that by default, the client timer values that can be sent back according to RFC 2131, options 58 and 59 are commented out. But if you wanted to send back those options, you would uncomment, and of course, you can change those values as well. If you uncomment what's here, you're going to send back the default values of 1,000 and 2,000. Okay, next slide. So logging, this is one of the things that I'm very excited about with Kia as well, because the logging gives you a lot of options. Okay, so I have a very simple logging setup here just to show you how to set up logging. So we have our loggers that we're defining. We're going to name one of these loggers is Kia DHCP4, and our output options, we're going to send any info messages or warning messages with at least info level. Of course, that will include info, warn, and error. We're going to send these to a file, in this case, /var/log/kia.log. Okay. And again, just below that, we are setting the severity to info in this case. Okay, next slide. So this is the part that I was saying that I'm really excited about. So in the previous example, we used the Kia-DHCP4 logger, Well, there are many of these that are already defined for you. We expect that there will be some more as we continue development. For example, we also have Kia-DHCP4.ddns, Kia-DHCP4-bad packets, Kia-DHCP4.options, and of course you'll have DHCP6 ones for these same ones as well. And again, there are many of these options or loggers already defined. What this allows you to do then is, if I need to turn on debugging, if I'm having an issue, say with client options, I'm trying to debug an issue with client options. The clients aren't getting the options that I think they should, or I'm having a hard time getting those options to the clients from my Kia server. Then I can set, for example, Kia-DHCP4.options logger to debug level. So I don't overwhelm my server with debug messages for other components that I'm not worried about at this particular moment. I can look only at the DHCP4 options in this case. There is a full list at the link there provided at the bottom of this slide. Highly recommend going out there and checking it out. Again, there are lots of different logger options that we have. Okay, next slide. All right, defining host reservations. So this is a very common topic. In this case here, this is our pool and subnet that we're already familiar with, that you've seen in the previous slides. So we are configuring we've configured a pool, again, 192.0.2.10 up to 200. So, and we're going to hand out clients addresses from that pool over interface ETH0. Now, we're also defining here a host reservation. So if we have a client that comes in with hardware, with this particular hardware address, 1A:1B:1C:1D:1E:1F, then that client is going to get the address 192.0.2.202. Now, you note in this example that the 202 address is outside of the range of the pool. That's entirely fine. If the address, you can also do this config with the address inside the pool. So if, for example, we wanted that hardware address to get the IP address 192.0.2.199, that would be entirely fine. With a host reservation in place, that address would not be handed out from the pool to any other client. Okay. And next slide. And so we've now reached the references slide, and my apologies, I've really gone pretty fast. I think I got a little excited with my WebEx problems. So my apologies for that. There are quite extensive Kia references. You can go to kia.isc.org. We have a Kia guide that's on kia.isc.org/docs. You can also sign up for the Kia users mailing list, which I highly recommend. It's fairly low traffic because there's, people are still just getting started with Kia. But what that means is that you get really good, well thought out and fairly quick responses from several of our developers. So the traffic on Kia users has been great. The OS package list that I mentioned is found here at this link, and then we also have a quick start guide that you can download and print out and fold in a nice, pretty little 3-page thing. All right, so luckily, since I was really fast, I have a lot of questions, so this is good. So I'll start with a few of these here. Better performance using what kind of backend, files or database? So the answer to this one is we've seen better performance regardless of the backend used. So in comparison to ISC DHCP. Now, the highest performance we've seen so far is with the mem file. I don't have any statistics on which of the databases are working faster with Kia at this point. We're actually undertaking a very pretty large performance testing at the moment with Kia. So more to be determined on the performance aspects. Let's see here. Any plans to support Oracle DB? Currently, we don't have plans to support that. That doesn't mean that we won't at some point in the future. It's just not currently on the list. Again, as we've mentioned, there will be a Cassandra possibility coming up pretty soon. Let's see. And my apologies, some of these Vicki has already answered via text. So if I double answer your question, I'm sorry. Will the PowerPoint be available? Yes. So the PowerPoint, well, PowerPoint maybe not, but the slides and the audio certainly will be available. All right, let's see. Okay, here's a good one. And I may ask, I think Sean Routhier, one of our DHCP engineers, is on the line, so I may ask him to chime in on this one. Is there an easy way to specify non-standard DHCP options? This was a huge pain with ISC DHCP. And Sean, if you're muted or you're having issues with the audio, feel free to jabber me your response on that.
So can people actually hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, Sean.
So yes, we can do custom options in Kia. It is different than how we did it in ISC DHCP. It's, I think, somewhat easier, but it's still got some of the same issues just because of what we're trying to do. That to define a custom option, if it's a nice simple one like just a text string, it's pretty straightforward. But if you have two different integer fields followed by a text string, it gets more complicated, and just defining that is awkward at times. I think it is easier, but for people who have been using ISC DHCP for years, they may find the change a little bit difficult at first, but we'll probably find it better in the future. I believe it will also be, it's more complete than what you can do with ISC DHCP. ISC DHCP, because of the underlying code, has difficulty handling certain types of option constructs. Kia does a better job with those.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Let's see. And this is another one that I'd like to pose to you, Sean. Is there a way to generate the DNS TXT record with Kia?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
The longer answer is you don't want the TXT record. Well, you probably don't want the TXT record. In Kia, we did do a DDNS implementation that is learned from some of the issues we had with the asynchronous version in ISC DHCP. But instead of doing the TXT, which was never actually a standard, we went straight to the DHCID, which is the standard. So if your question is, can we do something? The answer is yes. If your question is, can we seamlessly use the old TXT records that we were using for ISC DHCP, the answer is not at this time.
Okay. This is another one for you, Sean. What is the significance of mem in min file? Is it a file in the file system, or is it something more volatile?
It's two things. There is, well, let me step back one step. If you're using Kia with a database, the Kia server itself doesn't store any of the lease information. It pushes it all into the database, and then when it needs to determine if a lease is in use, it queries the database for that information. The mem file, it moves all that lease information into the Kia itself. So there's a store of that in memory basically very similar to what we did in ISC DHCP. So if you were to go look in your memory, you'd see all the lease information. But as with ISC DHCP, we need to store this information in non-volatile memory somewhere, so it gets written out to a lease file. Unlike ISC DHCP, we don't rewrite that lease file from the main Kia server every so often. In ISC DHCP, roughly every hour, the server will effectively stop for a couple seconds while it rewrites its lease file, especially if you have a particularly large lease file. In Kia, we simply keep adding to the lease file, and then every so often, which is somewhat user-settable, we push that lease file off to the side, start a new one, start writing to that one, and then have another program that will go off and compress the lease file, get rid of duplicate and so on entries. So it's, for the mem file, we have the information the Kia is using is stored in memory, and then the main data store is off in a file so that it can be used for restarts.
Gotcha. Okay. Hello, Jinmei, by the way. Jinmei asks, does Kia benefit from multi-thread or multi-process? So, to my knowledge, Sean, at this point, it's not multi-threaded. I'm not sure what the plan is on that, but is there a multi-process improvement with Kia?
Yes, it's not multi-threaded in that each of the major systems will only run a single thread at a time. So there's the V4, the V6 servers, what we call D2, the DHCP DDNS process, and then the last process that I just mentioned, the LSC process to clean up lease files. We don't have specific plans to do something with multi-threading. We've talked about that over the years, and eventually we will look into that more deeply. Right now, the primary reason we have for doing something like that would be to make it the performance better, and the performance is already a good deal better than ISC DHCP in most cases. So when we get the rest of what we think are the critical functions done, we can start looking at things like that. But for now, we're spending more of our time trying to do things like the host reservations in the database and so on, rather than go off and spend a lot of time trying to get the performance up when it's already a good deal better.
Gotcha. Thanks, Sean. And Vicki indicated that we have had some people that have tested multiple Kias on one server and were able to achieve more performance per total hardware. So again, we're also undertaking and have been for quite a while undertaking some performance testing. We're just not ready to share our results yet. We have some more work to be done on that. But again, the main takeaway for everyone is it's going to be certainly it is certainly faster than ISC DHCP. Let's see. Another one is, do you know of any commercial vendors who have integrated ISC DHCP that are switching to Kia? Not just yet. So we've certainly, many of the commercial sort of IPAM vendors are partners of ours. And we've certainly been in direct communication with a lot of them about Kia. I think you'll begin to see some of them implementing Kia at some point in the future. And actually, it just came to mind. We actually do. I do know of one that's more of an interface to ISC DHCP or Kia that has implemented it, and that is Min and Mice. They actually gave a nice Kia webinar not too long ago, and so you can begin to use the functionality within Kia through the Min and Mice suite. All right, let's see. Can Kia still push dynamic updates to bind or other DNS servers in cases where a true dynamic DNS, for example, from the client is not desired? Sean, I'm pretty certain that at this point, Kia does do dynamic updates to a bind server. That's correct, yes?
To a DNS server, yeah. We've tested it with bind, but in theory, if any DNS server is doing the standard dynamic DNS, it should work.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, so again, it's sending DNS protocol communication, so it should work with bind, and it should work with other servers as well. Please let us know if it does or does not. That's one thing we'd like to know. We may end up testing some of that with some of our friends over at NLNet Labs or CZNIC. We'll see how that goes, but that would be good to know. Let's see. Yeah, and someone has commented that the Minimice one is that suite is shipping later this summer. So while they have integrated Kia into their suite, it is not quite yet shipped. There's probably maybe an alpha out there, I'm not sure. But anyway, check on their site if you're interested in seeing what they're doing with it. And with that, I'm trying to see if there's any other questions, or Vicki, if you want to pick out some that I haven't gotten to, please do let me know. Some of these Vicki answered directly in the chat. Okay, here's some more. Oh, okay. A question, Sean, this would be for you. Is there, the question directly is what critical server functions are missing in Kia at the present? It's sort of hard to pinpoint what might be critical. It all depends on what your requirements are. Sean, do you have any updates on what functionality might not be there right now and what might be there soon? That's sort of overly general, but the best I can do.
One of the big ones that we're working on, and a lot of it's done already but hasn't been released and will be going out 1.1, is classification. The big issue is, as Eddy mentioned earlier, ISC DHCP is 21 years old, so we've had a huge amount of time to add new features to it over the years. And Kia hasn't had that time to gather stuff. So we need to go through and figure out what people actually care about, what people actually use from all the current features in ISC DHCP, and then figure out if we can replicate them in Kia. This is also a good time to point out that if you have particular features that you really need, especially if you have a use case to tell us why you need that feature, things like that will help us pick and choose which features get done. We have examples like putting limits on the number of leases for a particular class. That one isn't done yet and isn't particularly on our roadmap. We don't know if this is something people are truly using. If that's something you really and truly need, send us email or bring it up on the users list that Eddy mentioned to tell us this is something that's useful, this is something that I'm using, and here's my use case.
All right, thanks, Sean. Here's another one for you. Does Kia have support for dual stack clients per RFC 4361, in particular in terms of the DNS updates?
Hold on just a second.
Yeah, 4361.
Yeah. I believe it does, but I'd have to go check to make sure. The Kia DDNS was done in the not too distant past, not surprisingly. So all of these RFCs were already written, and I believe it handles this. ISC DHCP also does handle this one at this time. But this assumes that the client is doing the right thing, which is not always true. We have some comments about clients that aren't doing the right thing, and therefore the whole DDNS has issues with how to handle that particular client being dual stacked.
Okay. This one is another one. Can Kia scale to N nodes that is greater than 2 for high availability versus the 2 in DHCP failover? As I mentioned earlier, we're very excited about this possibility. So if your Kia servers are all pointing to the same database, then whichever server gets the handles the client transaction should be able to give the same address out. So in theory, you could have, I don't want to say unlimited, but you could have quite a few Kia servers that all access the same database. Now, the follow-up to that question is, if so, what are the implications of using several Kia servers in this arrangement? So the answer to that one is we're very excited about the possibilities. We don't know just yet what the implications are going to be. So we have some tests in that area going on right now, but we are excited about the possibilities. In theory, you should be able to have very many and very little side effects or implications of or negative implications of doing so. But of course, putting things in production and having real clients is the real test. So more to come on that one. Sean, do you have any thoughts on that? Like how many Kia nodes you could put in front of a database?
No, we're trying to do some work on seeing how that all works out. There are likely to be issues with how it all works when you have things distributed. If you try and distribute your database and try and distribute your Kia servers geographically, probably you'd be best off trying to keep them all in one data center to avoid partitioning type events. But
right.
We're trying to figure out how that all works and come up with some guidelines for doing it.
Gotcha. Also, Vicki reminded me that again, I know we're doing some testing with this right now, but she reminded that we are going to be publishing a white paper when that testing is done. So we'll have more information on the multiple Kia servers in front of a single database soon. Okay. Someone wanted to know like exactly how many leases per second we've been seeing. So in our testing, we have been seeing anywhere from 300 to 7,000 leases per second. This is compared to ISC DHCPs of, say, I don't know, 40 to 80, give or take some, in those numbers. But again, much more performant, but we've got to do there's some more testing that we need to do before we can be confident in the result. The other was, is there a migration guide, tips available in going from ISC DHCP to Kia? That is something that we're planning to work on. So there's been a lot of requests for migration utility. Actually, because of the work Min and Mice has already done with their suite, we do know that they have a migration utility that they're using. We suspect, as some of the other partners of ours, IPAM vendors, we suspect that there will be some more migration utilities, and then so we'll see where that work goes, and we'll certainly keep everyone posted in terms of a migration utility that may be available from ISC. Okay, we have just a few minutes left, and so since we have Sean on the phone, and I love to pick on Sean, even though he'll give me grief about it. Sean, what plans do you have for ISC DHCP 4.4?
So, as people have probably understood, is ISC DHCP is presumably nearing the end of its life as Kia takes over for it. We plan to continue supporting it for a while. We have customers that are using it. We have a lot of people that are using it and would have difficulty switching to Kia immediately. So we will be supporting it for a while. 4.4.0, probably the single biggest item in it will be to try and integrate better with bind. In 4.2.0, we started using bind libraries to do the asynchronous DDNS. At that point, bind did an export library versus its own internal library, and we're going to try and update things so that you can share the library more easily, either with a bind if you wanted to do that, or more usefully with multiple ISC DHCP servers or DHCP instances. So if you have a v4 and a v6 running, you can hopefully share the bind library and not have to have that duplicated. We have a number of smaller features that we're also looking at. As normal with a .0 release, we will be putting in features that may make things a little bit less stable. And we will then see what everybody says when we have it out the door and try and fix up any issues that show up. We will be continuing with 4.3 and 4.1 again for the future. With 4.3 getting a little bit of the features but more bug fixes, and 4.1 basically getting bug fixes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Sean. And also, thank you overall for being on the call and being available for these questions. So that worked out really well. Okay, everyone, we are near the top of the hour. So I think we've answered the majority of your questions. We always review the questions that came in, and if there is any that we did not get to, we'll do our best to send a response to you privately in the next couple of days. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining. Please do try out Kia and let us know how you get along with it. Let us know what you want it to do, what you like about it or don't like about it. Please send us feedback. So again, thanks everyone for joining. And a reminder that in 3 weeks, Marcin will be talking about Kia hooks. And again, he gets really excited about this stuff. So I think you'll enjoy spending some time with Marcin. All right, so thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.